Initiation, Human and Solar. By Alice Bailey. Originally published in 1922, this work is now under the public domain. Infinite thanks to all involved in the inspiration, writing, publishing, and preservation of this magnificent work of literature. Dedicated with reverence and gratitude to the Master K.H. Forward. The subject of initiation is one that has a great fascination for thinkers of all schools of thought, and even those who remain skeptical and critical would like to believe that this ultimate attainment were possible. To those who do not believe that such a goal is possible, this book is offered for what it may be worth as a formulation of an interesting hypothesis. To those who anticipate such a consummation of all their endeavors, this book is tendered in the hope that it may prove an inspiration and a help. Among Occidental thinkers at this time there is a wide diversity of view upon this momentous subject. There are those who think that it is not of sufficient immediate importance to engross their attention, and that if the average man adheres to the path of duty, and high-minded attention to the business in hand, he will duly arrive at his destination. This is undoubtedly true, yet as capacity for increased service, and the development of powers to be used in the helping of the race, are the reward of the man, who is willing to make the increased effort, and to pay the price which initiation demands. Perhaps this book may spur some on to attainment who might otherwise have drifted slowly towards their goal. They will then become givers, and not the recipients of help. There are those again who consider that the teaching given out in various books hitherto concerning initiation is erroneous. Initiation has been made out to be fairly easy of attainment, and to call for no such rectitude of character as might have been anticipated. The following chapters may serve to show that the criticism is not unmerited. Initiation is profoundly difficult of attainment, and calls for a strenuous discipline of the entire lower nature, and a life of self-effacing and self-abnegating devotion. At the same time, it must be remembered that the earlier teaching is right in essence, though belittled in interpretation. Again, there are some who are interested, yet who feel the possibilities involved are too far advanced for them, and that they need not occupy themselves with them at this stage of their evolution. This book seeks to make it apparent that here and now the average man may begin to build that character, and to lay those foundations of knowledge which are necessary before even the path of discipleship can be trodden. Due preparation may now be made, and men and women everywhere may, if they choose, fit themselves for the condition of discipleship, and tread the probationary path. Hundreds in the East and in the West are pressing onwards towards this goal, and in the unity of the one ideal, in their common aspiration and endeavor, they will meet before the one portal. They will then recognize themselves as brothers, severed by tongue and apparent diversity of belief, but fundamentally holding to the same one truth and serving the same God. Alice A. Bailey. Publisher's note: the nature and significance of certain of the present and subsequent writings of Mrs. Bailey make needful a clear definition of the responsibility for their publication. It is the belief of the publishers that there are many readers of today and of times to come who, by contact with these books, will be led to perceive their inspiration and high authority, and to find therein a guide for their feet, and an incentive for steadfast endeavor. Therefore, the undersigned have undertaken to publish all of Mrs. Bailey's works, and in nearly every instance to make them available to the public without restriction. They jointly assume full responsibility for such publication. Foster Bailey. Ernest S. Suffern, New York, 1922. The Constitution of Man, as considered in the following pages, is basically threefold, as follows. I, the monad, or pure spirit, the Father in heaven. This aspect reflects the three aspects of the Godhead. 1. Will or power the Father. 2. Love wisdom the Son. 3. Active intelligence the Holy Spirit, and is only contacted at the final initiations, when man is nearing the end of his journey and is perfected. The monad reflects itself again in 2. The ego, higher self, or individuality. This aspect is potentially 1. Spiritual will Atma. 2. Intuition Buddhi, love wisdom, the Christ principle. 3. Higher or abstract mind, higher monas. The ego begins to make its power felt in advanced men, and increasingly on the probationary path until by the third initiation the control of the lower self by the higher is perfected, and the highest aspect begins to make its energy felt. The ego reflects itself in 3. The personality, or lower self, physical plane man. This aspect is also threefold. 1. A mental body lower monos. 2. An emotional body astral body. 3. A physical body the dense physical, and the etheric body. The aim of evolution is therefore to bring man to the realization of the egoic aspect, and to bring the lower nature under its control. The Lord Buddha has said that we must not believe in a thing said merely because it is said, nor traditions because they have been handed down from antiquity, nor rumors, as such, nor writings by sages, because sages wrote them, nor fancies that we may suspect to have been inspired in us by a deva, that is, in presumed spiritual inspiration, nor from inferences drawn from some haphazard assumption we may have made, nor because of what seems an analogical necessity, nor on the mere authority of our teachers or masters. But we are to believe when the writing, doctrine, or saying is corroborated by our own reason and consciousness. For this, says he in concluding, I taught you not to believe merely because you have heard, but when you believed of your consciousness, then to act accordingly and abundantly. Secret Doctrine, Volume IL, page 401. Initiation, Human and Solar, Chapter 1, Introductory Remarks. Before entering upon the subject matter of the following articles on initiation, on the paths that open before the perfected man, and on the occult hierarchy, certain statements may be made which seem essential for the judicious study and comprehension of the ideas submitted. It is to be recognized that throughout this volume facts are alleged and definite statements made, which are not susceptible of immediate proof by the reader. Lest it be inferred that the writer arrogates to herself any credit or personal authority for the knowledge implied, she emphatically disavows all such claims or representations. She cannot do otherwise than present these statements as matters of fact. Nevertheless, she would urge those who find somewhat of merit in these pages that they be not estranged by any appearance of dogmatism in the presentation. Nor should the inadequacy of the personality of the writer act as a deterrent to the open-minded consideration of the message to which her name happens to be appended. In spiritual issues, names, personalities, and the voice of external authority hold small place. That alone is a safeguard which holds its warranty from inner recognition and inner direction. It is not, therefore, material whether the reader receive the message of these pages as a spiritual appeal in an idealistic setting, a presentation of alleged facts, or a theory evolved by one student and presented for the consideration of fellow students. To each it is offered with whatever of inner response it may evoke, for whatever of inspiration and of light it may bring. In these days of the shattering of the old form and the building of the new, adaptability is needed. We must avert the danger of crystallization through pliability and expansion. The old order changeth, but primarily it is a change of dimension and of aspect, and not of material or of foundation. The fundamentals have always been true. To each generation is given the part of conserving the essential features of the old and beloved form, but also of wisely expanding and enriching it. Each cycle must add the gain of further research and scientific endeavor, and subtract that which is worn out and of no value. Each age must build in the product and triumphs of its period, and abstract the accretions of the past that would dim and blur the outline. Above all, to each generation is given the joy of demonstrating the strength of the old foundations, and the opportunity to build upon these foundations a structure that will meet the needs of the innate evolving life. The ideas that are elaborated here find their corroboration in certain facts that are stated in the occult literature now extant. These facts are 3 in number, and are as follows. A. In the creation of the Sun and the 7 sacred planets composing our solar system, our logos employed mat tech that was already impregnated with particular qualities. Mrs. Besant in her book, Avatars, which some of us think the most valuable of all her writings, because one of the most suggestive, makes the statement that our solar system is builded out of matter already existing, out of matter already gifted with certain properties, page 48. This matter, therefore, we deduce, held latent certain faculties that were forced to demonstrate in a peculiar way, under the law of cause and effect, as does all else in the universe. All manifestation is of a septenary nature, and the central light which we call deity, the one ray of divinity, manifests first as a triplicity, and then as a septenary. The one God shines forth as God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit, and these three are again reflected through the seven spirits before the throne, or the seven planetary logoi. The students of occultism of non-Christian origin may call these beings the one ray, demonstrating through the three major rays and the four minor, making a divine septenary. The synthetic ray which blends them all is the great love-wisdom ray, for verily and indeed God is love. This ray is the indigo ray, and is the blending ray. It is the one which will, at the end of the greater cycle, absorb the others in the achievement of synthetic perfection. It is the manifestation of the second aspect of logoic life. It is this aspect, that of the form builder, that makes this solar system of ours the most concrete of the three major systems. The love or wisdom aspect demonstrates through the building of the form, for God is love, and in that God of love avenue live and move and have our being, and will to the end of Ionian manifestation. See, the seven planes of divine manifestation, or the seven major planes of our system, are but the seven subplanes of the lowest cosmic plane. The seven rays of which we hear so much, and which hold so much of interest and of mystery, are likewise but the seven sub-rays of one cosmic ray. The 12 creative hierarchies are themselves but subsidiary branches of one cosmic hierarchy. They form but one chord in the cosmic symphony. When that sevenfold cosmic chord, of which we form so humble a part, reverberates in synthetic perfection, then, and only then, will come comprehension of the words in the book of Job, the morning stars sang together. Dissonance yet sounds forth, and discord arises from many systems, but in the progression of the eons an ordered harmony will eventuate, and the day will dawn when, if we dare speak of eternities in the terms of time, the sound of the perfected universe will resound to the uttermost bounds of the furthest constellation. Then will be known the mystery of the marriage song of the heavens. The reader is also asked to remember and weigh certain ideas prior to taking up the study of initiation. Due to the extreme complexity of the matter, it is an utter impossibility for us to do more than get a general idea of the scheme, hence the futility of dogmatism. We can do no more than sense a fraction of some wonderful whole, utterly beyond the reach of our consciousness, a whole that the highest angel or perfected being is but beginning to realize. When we recognize the fact that the average man is as yet fully conscious only on the physical plane, nearly conscious on the emotional plane, and only developing the consciousness on the mental plane, it is obvious that his comprehension of cosmic data can be but rudimentary. When we recognize the further fact that to be conscious on a plane and to have control on that plane are two very different conditions, it becomes apparent how remote is the possibility of our approximating more than the general trend of the cosmic scheme. We must recognize also that danger lies in dogma, and in the hidebound facts of textbooks, and that safety lies in flexibility, and in a shifting angle of vision. A fact, for instance, looked at from the standpoint of humanity, using the word fact in the scientific sense as that which has been demonstrated past all doubt and question, may not be a fact from the standpoint of a master. To him it may be but part of a greater fact, only a fraction of the whole. Since his vision is fourth and fifth dimensional, his realization of the place of time in eternity must be more accurate than ours. He sees things from above downwards, and as one to whom time is not. An inexplicable principle of mutation exists in the mind of the Logos, or the deity of our solar system, and governs all his actions. We see but the ever-changing forms, and catch glimpses of the steadily evolving life within those forms, but as yet have no clue to the principle which works through the shifting kaleidoscope of solar systems, rays, hierarchies, planets, planes, schemes, rounds, races, and sub-races. They interweave, interlock, and interpenetrate each other, and utter bewilderment is ours, as the wonderful pattern they form unfolds before us. We know that somewhere in that scheme we, the human hierarchy, have our place. All therefore that we can do is to seize upon any data that seems to affect our own welfare, and concern our own evolution, and from the study of the human being in the three worlds seek to understand somewhat the macrocosm. We know not how the one can become the three become the seven, and so proceed to inconceivable differentiation. To human vision, this interweaving of the system forms an unimaginable complexity, the key to which seems not to be forthcoming. Seen from the angle of a master, we know that all proceeds in ordered sequence. Seen from the angle of divine vision, the whole will move in harmonious unison, producing a form geometrically accurate. Browning had hold of a part of this truth when he wrote, "All's change, but permanence as well, and, continued, truth inside, and outside, truth also, and between each, falsehood that is change, as truth is permanence. Truth successively takes shape, one grade above its last presentment. We must remember also that beyond a certain point it is not safe nor wise to carry the communication of the facts of the solar system. Much must remain esoteric and veiled. The risks of too much knowledge are far greater than the menace of too little. With knowledge comes responsibility and power, two things for which the race is not yet ready. Therefore all we can do is to study and correlate with what wisdom and discretion may be ours, using the knowledge that may come for the good of those we seek to help, and recognizing that in the wise use of knowledge comes increased capacity to receive the hidden wisdom. Coupled also with the wise adaptation of knowledge to the surrounding need must grow the capacity for discreet reservation, and the use of the discriminating faculty. When we can wisely use, discreetly withhold, and soundly discriminate, we give the surest guarantee to the watching teachers of the race that we are ready for a fresh revelation. We must resign ourselves to the fact that the only way in which we can find the clue to the mystery of the rays, systems, and hierarchies, lies in the study of the law of correspondences or analogy. It is the one thread by which we can find our way through the labyrinth, and the one ray of light that shines through the darkness of the surrounding ignorance. H. P. Blavatsky, in The Secret Doctrine, has told us so, but as yet very little has been done by students to avail themselves of that clue. In the study of this law we need to remember that the correspondence lies in its essence, and not in the exoteric working out of detail, as we think we see it from our present standpoint. The factor of time leads us astray for one thing. We err when we attempt to fix stated times or limits. All in evolution progresses through merging, with a constant process of overlapping and mingling. Only broad generalities and a recognition of fundamental points of analogy are possible to the average student. The moment he attempts to reduce to chart form and to tabulate in detail, he enters realms where he is bound to err, and staggers through a fog that will ultimately overwhelm him. Nevertheless, in the scientific study of this law of analogy will come a gradual growth of knowledge, and in the slow accumulation of facts will gradually be built up an ever-expanding form that will embody much of the truth. The student will then awake to the realization that after all the study and toil he has at least a wide general conception of the logoic thought form into which he can fit the details as he acquires them through many incarnations. This brings us to the last point to be considered before entering upon the subject proper, which is, that the development of the human being is but the passing from one state of consciousness to another. It is a succession of expansions, a growth of that faculty of awareness that constitutes the predominant characteristic of the indwelling thinker. It is the progressing from consciousness polarized in the personality, lower self, or body, to that polarized in the higher self, ego, or soul, thence to a polarization in the monad, or spirit, till the consciousness eventually is divine. As the human being develops, the faculty of awareness extends first of all beyond the circumscribing walls that confine it within the lower kingdoms of nature, the mineral, vegetable and animal, to the three worlds of the evolving personality, to the planet whereon he plays his part, to the system wherein that planet revolves, until it finally escapes from the solar system itself and becomes universal. Chapter 2, Initiation Defined. The question anent initiation is one that is coming more and more before the public. Before many centuries pass, the old mysteries will be restored, and an inner body will exist in the church of the period, of which the nucleus is already forming, wherein the first initiation will become exoteric, in this sense only, that the taking of the first initiation will, before so very long, be the most sacred ceremony of the Church, performed exoterically as one of the mysteries given at stated periods, attended by those concerned. It will also hold a similar place in the ritual of the Masons. At this ceremony, those ready for the first initiation will be publicly admitted to the lodge by one of its members, authorized to do so by the great Hierophant himself. Word defined. When we speak of initiation, of wisdom, of knowledge, or of the probationary path, what do we mean? We use the word so glibly, without due consideration of the meaning involved. Take, for instance, the word first mentioned. Many are the definitions, and many are the explanations to be found as to its scope, the preparatory steps, the work to be done between initiations, and its result and effects. One thing before all else is apparent to the most superficial student, and that is, that the magnitude of the subject is such that in order to deal with it adequately one should be able to write from the viewpoint of an initiate. When this is not the case, anything that is said may be reasonable, logical, interesting, or suggestive, but not conclusive. The word initiation comes from two Latin words, into, and ire, to go, therefore, the making of a beginning, or the entrance into something. It posits, in its widest sense, in the case we are studying, an entrance into the spiritual life, or into a fresh stage in that life. It is the first step, and the succeeding steps, upon the path of holiness. Literally, therefore, a man who has taken the first initiation is one who has taken the first step into the spiritual kingdom, having passed out of the definitely human kingdom into the superhuman. Just as he passed out of the animal kingdom into the human at individualization, so he has entered upon the life of the spirit, and for the first time has the right to be called a spiritual man in the technical significance of the word. He is entering upon the fifth or final stage in our present fivefold evolution. Having groped his way through the hall of ignorance during many ages, and having gone to school in the hall of learning, he is now entering into the university, or the hall of wisdom. When he has passed through that school, he will graduate with his degree as a master of compassion. It might be of benefit to us also if we studied first the difference or the connection between knowledge, understanding, and wisdom. Though in ordinary parlance they are frequently interchanged, as used technically they are dissimilar. Knowledge is the product of the hall of learning. It might be termed the sum total of human discovery and experience, that which can be recognized by the five senses, and be correlated, diagnosed, and defined by the use of the human intellect. It is that about which we feel mental certitude, or that which we can ascertain by the use of experiment. It is the compendium of the arts and sciences. It concerns all that deals with the building and developing of the form side of things. Therefore it concerns the material side of evolution, matter in the solar system, in the planet, in the three worlds of human evolution, and in the bodies of men. Wisdom is the product of the hall of wisdom. It has to do with the development of the life within the form, with the progress of the spirit through those ever-changing vehicles, and with the expansions of consciousness that succeed each other from life to life. It deals with the life side of evolution. Since it deals with the essence of things and not with the things themselves, it is the intuitive apprehension of truth apart from the reasoning faculty, and the innate perception that can distinguish between the false and the true, between the real and the unreal. It is more than that, for it is also the growing capacity of the thinker to enter increasingly into the mind of the Logos, to realize the true inwardness of the great pageant of the universe, to vision the objective, and to harmonize more and more with the higher measure. For our present purpose, which is to study somewhat the path of holiness and its various stages, it may be described as the realization of the kingdom of God within, and the apprehension of the kingdom of God without in the solar system. Perhaps it might be expressed as the gradual blending of the paths of the mystic and the occultist, the rearing of the temple of wisdom upon the foundation of knowledge. Wisdom is the science of the spirit, just as knowledge is the science of matter. Knowledge is separative and objective, whilst wisdom is synthetic and subjective. Knowledge divides, wisdom unites. Knowledge differentiates whilst wisdom blends. What, then, is meant by the understanding? The understanding may be defined as the faculty of the thinker in time to appropriate knowledge as the foundation for wisdom, that which enables him to adapt the things of form to the life of the spirit, and to take the flashes of inspiration that come to him from the hall of wisdom and link them to the facts of the hall of learning. Perhaps the whole idea might be expressed in this way: wisdom concerns the one self, knowledge deals with the not self, whilst the understanding is the point of view of the ego, or thinker, or his relation between them. In the hall of ignorance the form controls, and the material side of things has the predominance. Man is there polarized in the personality or lower self. In the hall of learning the higher self, or ego, strives to dominate that form until gradually a point of equilibrium is reached where the man is controlled entirely by neither. Later the ego controls more and more, until in the hall of wisdom it dominates in the three lower worlds, and in increasing degree the inherent divinity assumes the mastery. Aspects of initiation. Initiation, or the process of undergoing an expansion of consciousness, is part of the normal process of evolutionary development, viewed on a large scale, and not from the standpoint of the individual. When viewed from the individual standpoint, it has come to be narrowed down to the moment wherein the evolving unit definitely apprehends that, by dint of his own effort, aided by the advice and suggestions of the watching teachers of the race, he has reached a point wherein a certain range of knowledge of a subjective nature, from the physical plane point of view, is his. It is in the nature of that experience wherein a pupil in a school realizes suddenly that he has mastered a lesson, and that the rationale of a subject, and the method of procedure, are his to use intelligently. These moments of intelligent apprehension follow the evolving monad throughout his long pilgrimage. What has been misinterpreted somewhat at this stage of comprehension is the fact that at various periods the emphasis is laid on different grades of expansion, and always the hierarchy endeavors to bring the race to the point where its units will have some idea of the next step to be taken. Each initiation marks the passing of the pupil in the hall of wisdom into a higher class, marks the clearer shining forth of the inner fire, and the transition from one point of polarization to another entails the realization of an increasing unity with all that lives and the essential oneness of the self with all selves. It results in a horizon that continuously enlarges until it includes the sphere of creation. It is a growing capacity to see and hear on all the planes. It is an increased consciousness of God's plans for the world, and an increased ability to enter into those plans and to further them. It is the effort in the abstract mind to pass an examination. It is the honor class in the master's school, and is within the attainment of those souls whose karma permits, and whose efforts suffice to fulfill the aim. Initiation leads to the mount whence vision can be had, a vision of the eternal now, wherein past, present, and future exist as one, a vision of the pageant of the races with the golden thread of pedigree carried through the many types, a vision of the golden sphere that holds in unison all the many evolutions of our system, deva, human, animal, vegetable, mineral, and elemental, and through which the pulsating life can be clearly seen beating in regular rhythm, a vision of the logoic thought form on the archetypal plane, a vision that grows from initiation to initiation until it embraces all the solar system. Initiation leads to the stream that, once entered, sweeps a man onward until it carries him to the feet of the Lord of the world, to the feet of his Father in heaven, to the feet of the threefold logos. Initiation leads to the cave within whose circumscribing walls the pairs of opposites are known, and the secret of good and evil is revealed. It leads to the cross and to that utter sacrifice which must transpire before perfect liberation is attained, and the initiate stands free of all earth's fetters, held by naught in the three worlds. It leads through the hall of wisdom, and puts into a man's hands the key to all information, systemic and cosmic, in graduated sequence. It reveals the hidden mystery that lies at the heart of the solar system. It leads from one state of consciousness to another. As each state is entered, the horizon enlarges, the vista extends, and the comprehension includes more and more, until the expansion reaches a point where the self embraces all selves, including all that is moving and unmoving. As phrased by an ancient scripture, initiation involves ceremony. It is this aspect that has been emphasized in the minds of men, perhaps a little to the exclusion of the true significance. Primarily, it involves the capacity to see, hear, and comprehend, and to synthesize and correlate knowledge. It does not necessarily involve the development of the psychic faculties, but it does entail the inner comprehension that sees the value underlying the form, and recognizes the purpose pervading circumstances. It is the capacity that senses the lesson to be learnt from any given occurrence and event, and that by means of these comprehensions and recognitions affects an hourly, weekly, yearly growth and expansion. This process of gradual expansion, the result of the definite effort and strenuous right thinking and living of the aspirant himself, and not of some occult teacher performing an occult rite, leads to what one might term a crisis. At this crisis, which necessitates the aid of a master, a definite act of initiation is performed, which, acting on a particular center, produces a result on some one body. It keys the atoms to a certain pitch, and enables a new rate of rhythm to be attained. This ceremony of initiation marks a point of attainment. It does not bring about attainment, as is so often the misconception. It simply marks the recognition by the watching teachers of the race of a definite point in evolution reached by the pupil, and gives two things. 1. An expansion of consciousness that admits the personality into the wisdom attained by the ego, and in the higher initiations into the consciousness of the monad. 2. A brief period of enlightenment wherein the initiate sees that portion of the path that lies ahead to be trodden, and wherein he shares consciously in the great plan of evolution. After initiation, the work to be done consists largely in making that expansion of consciousness part of the equipment for the practical use of the personality, and in mastering that portion of the path that has yet to be traversed. The place and effect of initiation. The ceremony of initiation takes place on the three higher subplanes of the mental plane, and on the three higher planes, according to the initiation. The five-pointed star, at the initiations on the mental plane, flashes out above the head of the initiate. This concerns the first initiations, which are undergone in the causal vehicle. It has been said that the first two initiations take place upon the astral plane, but this is incorrect, and the statement has given rise to a misunderstanding. They are felt profoundly in connection with the astral and physical bodies, and the lower mental, and affect their control. The chief effect being felt in those bodies, the initiate may interpret them as having taken place on the planes concerned, as the vividness of the effect and the stimulation of the first two initiations works out largely in the astral body. But it must ever be remembered that the major initiations are taken in the causal body or, dissociated from that body, on the buddhic plane or atmic plane. At the final two initiations which set a man free from the three worlds, and enable him to function in the body of vitality of the logos and wield that force, the initiate becomes the five-pointed star, and it descends upon him, merges in him, and he is seen at its very center. This descent is brought about by the action of the initiator, wielding the rod of power, and puts a man in touch with the center in the body of the planetary logos of which he is a part, and this consciously. The two initiations called the sixth and seventh take place on the buddhic and atmic planes. The five-pointed star blazes forth from within itself, as the esoteric phrase has it, and becomes the seven-pointed star. It descends upon the man and he enters within the flame. Again, the four initiations, prior to that of the adept, mark respectively the attainment of certain proportions of atomic matter in the bodies. For instances, at the first initiation 1/4 atomic matter, at the second 1/2 atomic matter, at the third 3/4 atomic matter, and so on to the completion. Since Buddhi is the unifying principle, or the welder of all, at the fifth initiation the adept lets the lower vehicles go, and stands in his Buddhic sheath. He creates thence his body of manifestation. Each initiation gives more control on the rays, if one may so express it, although this does not adequately convey the idea. Words so often mislead. At the fifth initiation, when the adept stands master in the three worlds, he controls more or less, according to his line of development, the 5 rays that are specially manifesting at the time he takes that initiation. At the sixth initiation, if he takes the higher degree, he gains power on another ray, and at the seventh initiation he wields power on all the rays. The sixth initiation marks the point of attainment of the Christ, and brings the synthetic ray of the system under his control. We need to remember that initiation gives the initiate power on the rays, and not power over the rays, for this marks a very definite difference. Every initiate has, of course, for his primary or spiritual ray one of the 3 major rays, and the ray of his monad is the one on which he at length gains power. The love ray, or the synthetic ray of the system, is the final one achieved. Those who pass away from the earth after the 5th initiation, or those who do not become masters in physical incarnation, take their subsequent initiations elsewhere in the system. All are in the logoic consciousness. One great fact to be borne in mind is that the initiations of the planet or of the solar system are but the preparatory initiations of admission into the Greater Lodge on Sirius. We have the symbolism held for us fairly well in Masonry, and in combining the Masonic method with what we are told of the steps on the path of holiness, we get an approximate picture. Let us enlarge somewhat. The first 4 initiations of the solar system correspond to the 4 initiations of the threshold, prior to the first cosmic initiation. The 5th initiation corresponds to the first cosmic initiation, that of entered apprentice in Masonry, and makes a master and entered apprentice of the lodge on Sirius. The 6th initiation is analogous to the 2nd degree in Masonry, whilst the 7th initiation makes the adept a master mason of the Brotherhood on Sirius. A master, therefore, is one who has taken the 7th planetary initiation, the 5th solar initiation, and the 1st Sirian or cosmic initiation. At one meant, the result of initiation. A point that we need to grasp is that each successive initiation brings about a more complete unification of the personality and the ego, and on higher levels still, with the monad. The whole evolution of the human spirit is a progressive at one ment. In the at one ment between the ego and the personality lies hid the mystery of the Christian doctrine of the atonement. One unification takes place at the moment of individualization, when man becomes a conscious rational entity, in contradistinction to the animals. As evolution proceeds, successive at oments occur, at one ment on all levels, emotional, intuitional, spiritual and divine, consists in conscious, continuous functioning. In all cases it is preceded by a burning, through the medium of the inner fire, and by the destruction, through sacrifice, of all that separates. The approach to unity is through destruction of the lower, and of all that forms a barrier. Take, in illustration, the web that separates the etheric body and the emotional. When that web has been burned away by the inner fire, the communication between the bodies of the personality becomes continuous and complete, and the 3 lower vehicles function as one. You have a somewhat analogous situation on the higher levels, though the parallel cannot be pushed to detail. The intuition corresponds to the emotional, and the 4 higher levels of the mental plane to the etheric. In the destruction of the causal body at the time of the 4th initiation, called symbolically the crucifixion, you have a process analogous to the burning of the web that leads to the unification of the bodies of the personality. The disintegration that is a part of the Arhat initiation leads to unity between the ego and the monad, expressing itself in the triad. It is the perfect at one ment. The whole process is therefore for the purpose of making man consciously one, first, with himself, and those in incarnation with him. Second, with his higher self, and thus with all selves. Third, with his Spirit, or Father in heaven, and thus with all monads. Fourth, with the Logos, the three in one and the one in three. Man becomes a conscious human being through the instrumentality of the Lords of the Flame, through their enduring sacrifice. Man becomes a conscious ego, with the consciousness of the higher self, at the third initiation, through the instrumentality of the Masters and of the Christ, and through their sacrifice in taking physical incarnation for the helping of the world. Man unites with the monad at the fifth initiation, through the instrumentality of the Lord of the world, the solitary watcher, the great sacrifice. Man becomes one with the Logos through the instrumentality of one about whom naught may be said. Chapter 3. The work of the hierarchy. Though the subject of the occult hierarchy of the planet is of such a profoundly momentous interest to the average man, yet its real significance will never be understood until men realize four things in connection with it. First, that the entire hierarchy of spiritual beings represents a synthesis of forces or of energies, which forces or energies are consciously manipulated for the furtherance of planetary evolution. This will become more apparent as we proceed. Secondly, that these forces, demonstrating in our planetary scheme through those great personalities who compose the hierarchy, link it and all that it contains with the greater hierarchy which we call solar. Our hierarchy is a miniature replica of the greater synthesis of those self-conscious entities who manipulate, control, and demonstrate through the Sun and the 7 sacred planets, as well as the other planets, greater and smaller, of which our solar system is composed. Thirdly, that this hierarchy of forces has 4 preeminent lines of work: to develop self-consciousness in all beings. The hierarchy seeks to provide fit conditions for the development of self-consciousness in all beings. This it produces primarily in man through its initial work of mending the higher 3 aspects of spirit with the lower 4, through the example it sets of service, sacrifice, and renunciation, and through constant streams of light, occultly understood, which emanate from it. The hierarchy might be considered as the aggregate on our planet of the forces of the 5th kingdom in nature. This kingdom is entered through the full development and control of the 5th principle of mind, and its transmutation into wisdom, which is literally the intelligence applied to all states through the full conscious utilization of the faculty of discriminative love. To develop consciousness in the 3 lower kingdoms, as is well known, the 5 kingdoms of nature on the evolutionary arc might be defined as follows: the mineral kingdom, the vegetable kingdom, the animal kingdom, the human kingdom, and the spiritual kingdom. All these kingdoms embody some type of consciousness, and it is the work of the hierarchy to develop these types to perfection through the adjustment of karma, through the agency of force, and through the providing of right conditions. Some idea of the work may be gained if we briefly summarize the different aspects of consciousness to be developed in the various kingdoms. In the mineral kingdom, the work of the hierarchy is directed toward the development of the discriminative and selective activity. One characteristic of all matter is activity of some kind, and the moment that activity is directed towards the building of forms, even the most elemental land, the faculty of discrimination will demonstrate. This is recognized by scientists everywhere, and in this recognition they are approximating the findings of the divine wisdom. In the vegetable kingdom, to this faculty of discrimination is added that of response to sensation, and the rudimentary condition of the second aspect of divinity is to be seen, just as in the mineral kingdom a similar rudimentary reflection of the third aspect of activity is making itself felt. In the animal kingdom, this rudimentary activity and feeling are increased, and symptoms, if it might be so inadequately expressed, are to be found of the first aspect, or embryonic will and purpose. We may call it hereditary instinct, but it works out in fact as purpose in nature. It has been wisely stated by H.P. Blavatsky that man is the macrocosm for the 3 lower kingdoms, for in him these 3 lines of development are synthesized and come to their full fruition. He is verily and indeed intelligence, actively and wonderfully manifested. He is incipient love and wisdom, even though as yet they may be at the goal of his endeavor, and he has that embryonic, dynamic, initiating will which will come to a fuller development after he has entered into the fifth kingdom. In the fifth kingdom, the consciousness to be developed is that of the group, and this shows itself in the full flowering of the love-wisdom faculty. Man but repeats on a higher turn of the spiral the work of the three lower kingdoms, for in the human kingdom he shows forth the third aspect of active intelligence. In the fifth kingdom, which is entered at the first initiation, and which covers all the period of time wherein a man takes the first 5 initiations, and that wherein he works as a master, as part of the hierarchy, the love-wisdom, or second aspect, comes to its consummation. At the 6th and 7th initiations the first, or will, aspect shines forth, and from being a master of compassion, and a lord of love the adept becomes something more. He enters into a still higher consciousness than that of the group, and becomes God-conscious. The great will or purpose of the Logos becomes his. The fostering of the various attributes of divinity, the tending of the seed of self-consciousness in all beings, is the work of those entities who have achieved, who have entered into the fifth kingdom, and who have there made their great decision, and that inconceivable renunciation which leads them to stay within the planetary scheme, and thus cooperate with the plans of the planetary Logos on the physical plane. To transmit the will of the planetary Logos, to act as the transmitter to men and devas or angels, of the will of the planetary Logos, and through him of the solar Logos. Each planetary scheme, ours amongst the others, is a center in the body logoic, and is expressing some form of energy or force. Each center expresses its particular type of force, demonstrated in a triple manner, producing thus universally the 3 aspects in manifestation. One of the great realizations which come to those who enter into the fifth kingdom is that of the particular type of force which our own planetary Logos embodies. The wise student will ponder on this statement, for it holds the clue to much that may be seen in the world today. The secret of synthesis has been lost, and only when men again get back the knowledge which was theirs in earlier cycles, having been mercifully withdrawn in Atlantean days, of the type of energy which our scheme should be demonstrating, will the world problems adjust themselves, and the world rhythm be stabilized. This cannot be as yet, for this knowledge is of a dangerous kind, and at present the race as a whole is not group-conscious, and therefore cannot be trusted to work, think, plan, and act for the group. Man is as yet too selfish, but there is no cause for discouragement in this fact. Group consciousness is already somewhat more than a vision, whilst brotherhood, and the recognition of its obligations, is beginning to permeate the consciousness of men everywhere. This is the work of the hierarchy of light, to demonstrate to men the true meaning of brotherhood, and to foster in them response to that ideal which is latent in one and all. To set an example to humanity, the fourth thing that men need to know and to realize as a basic fact is that this hierarchy is composed of those who have triumphed over matter, and who have achieved the goal by the very self-same steps that individuals tread today. These spiritual personalities, these adepts and masters, have wrestled and fought for victory and mastery upon the physical plane, and struggled with the miasmas, the fogs, the dangers, the troubles, the sorrows and pains of everyday living. They have trodden every step of the path of suffering, have undergone every experience, have surmounted every difficulty, and have won out. These elder brothers of the race have one and all undergone the crucifixion of the personal self, and know that utter renunciation of all, which is the lot of every aspirant at this time. There is no phase of agony, no rending sacrifice, no via dolorosa that they have not in their time trodden, and herein lies their right to serve, and the strength of the method of their appeal. Knowing the quintessence of pain, knowing the depth of sin and of suffering, their methods can be exquisitely measured to the individual need, yet at the same time their realization of the liberation to be achieved through pain, penalty, and suffering, and their apprehension of the freedom that comes through the sacrifice of the form by the medium of the purificatory fires, suffices to give them a firm hand, an ability to persist even when the form may seem to have undergone a sufficiency of suffering, and a love that triumphs over all setbacks, for it is founded on patience and experience. These elder brothers of humanity are characterized by a love which endures, and which acts ever for the good of the group, by a knowledge which has been gained through a millennia of lives, in which they have worked their way from the bottom of life and of evolution well nigh to the top, by an experience which is based on time itself, and a multiplicity of personality reactions and interactions, by a courage which is the result of that experience, and which, having itself been produced by ages of endeavor, failure, and renewed endeavor, and having in the long run led to triumph, can now be placed at the service of the race, by a purpose which is enlightened and intelligent, and which is cooperative, adjusting itself to the group and hierarchical plan and thus fitting in with the purpose of the planetary logos, and finally they are distinguished by a knowledge of the power of sound. This final fact is the basis of that aphorism which states that all true occultists are distinguished by the characteristics of knowledge, dynamic will, courage, and silence. To know, to will, to dare, and to be silent. Knowing the plan so well, and having clear, illuminated vision, they can bend their will unflinchingly and unswervingly to the great work of creation by the power of sound. This leads to their silence where the average man would speak, and their speaking where the average man is silent. When men have grasped the 4 facts here enumerated, and they are established as acknowledged truths in the consciousness of the race, then may we look for a return of that cycle of peace and rest and righteousness, which is foretold in all the scriptures of the world. The Son of Righteousness will then arise with healing in his wings, and the peace which passeth understanding will reign in the hearts of men in dealing with this matter of the work of the occult hierarchy. In a book for the general public, much must be left unsaid. The average man is interested and his curiosity is aroused by reference to these personalities, but men are not yet ready for more than the most general information. For those who, from curiosity, pass on to desire and seek to know the truth as it is, more will be forthcoming, when they themselves have done the necessary work and study. Investigation is desired, and the attitude of mind which it is hoped this book will arouse might be summed up in the following words. These statements sound interesting and perchance they are true. The religions of all nations, the Christian included, give indications that seem to substantiate these ideas. Let us therefore accept these ideas as a working hypothesis as to the consummation of the evolutionary process in man, and his work upon the attainment of perfection. Let us therefore seek for the truth, as a fact in our own consciousness. Every religious faith holds out the promise that those who seek with earnestness shall find that which they are seeking. Let us, therefore, seek. If by our search we find that all these statements are but visionary dreams, and profit not at all, leading us only into darkness, time will nevertheless not have been lost, for we shall have ascertained where not to look. If by our search, on the other hand, corroboration comes little by little, and the light shines ever more clearly, let us persist until that day dawns when the light which shineth in darkness will have illuminated the heart and brain, and the seeker will awaken to the realization that the whole trend of evolution has been to bring him this expansion of consciousness and this illumination, and that the attainment of the initiatory process, and the entrance into the 5th kingdom is no wild chimera or phantasm, but an established fact in the consciousness. This each man must ascertain for himself. Those who know may state a fact to be thus and so, but the dictum of another person and the enunciation of a theory do not aid beyond giving to the seeker confirmatory indication. Each soul has to ascertain for himself, and must find out within himself, remembering ever that the kingdom of God is within, and that only those facts which are realized within the individual consciousness as truths are of any real value. In the meantime, that which many know, and have ascertained within themselves to be truths of an incontrovertible nature for them, may here be stated, to the intelligent reader will then arise the opportunity and the responsibility of ascertaining for himself their falsity or truth. Chapter 4. The founding of the hierarchy, its appearance on the planet. It is not sought, in this book, to deal with the steps which led to the founding of the hierarchy on the planet, nor to consider the conditions preceding the advent of those great beings. This can be studied in other occult books in the Occident, and in the sacred scriptures of the East. Suffice it for our purpose to say that in the middle of the Lemurian epoch, approximately 18 million years ago, occurred a great event which signified, among other things, the following developments: the planetary logos of our Earth scheme, one of the 7 spirits before the throne, took physical incarnation, and, under the form of Sanat Kumara, the Ancient of Days, and the Lord of the World, came down to this dense physical planet, and has remained with us ever since. Owing to the extreme purity of his nature, and the fact that he is, from the human standpoint, relatively sinless, and hence incapable of response to aught on the dense physical plane, he was unable to take a dense physical body such as ours, and has to function in his etheric body. He is the greatest of all the avatars, or coming ones, for he is a direct reflection of that great entity who lives, and breathes, and functions through all the evolutions on this planet, holding all within his aura or magnetic sphere of influence. In him we live and move and have our being, and none of us can pass beyond the radius of his aura. He is the great sacrifice, who left the glory of the high places, and for the sake of the evolving sons of men took upon himself a physical form, and was made in the likeness of man. He is the silent watcher, as far as our immediate humanity is concerned, although literally the planetary logos himself, on the higher plane of consciousness whereon he functions, is the true silent watcher where the planetary scheme is concerned. Perhaps it might be stated thus, that the Lord of the World, the one initiator, holds the same place in connection with the planetary logos as the physical manifestation of a master holds to that master's monad on the monadic plane. In both cases the intermediate state of consciousness has been superseded, that of the ego or higher self, and that which we see and know is the direct self-created manifestation of pure spirit itself. Hence the sacrifice. It must here be borne in mind that in the case of Sanat Kumara, there is a tremendous difference in degree, for his point in evolution is as far in advance of that of an adept as that adept's is in advance of animal man. This will be somewhat elaborated in the next section of our subject. With the Ancient of Days came a group of other highly evolved entities, who represent his own individual karmic group, and those beings who are the outcome of the triple nature of the planetary logos. If one might so express it, they embody the forces emanating from the head, heart, and throat centers, and they came in with Sanat Kumara to form focal points of planetary force, for the helping of the great plan for the self-conscious unfoldment of all life. Their places have gradually been filled by the sons of men as they qualify, though this includes very few, until lately, from our immediate earth humanity. Those who are now the inner group around the Lord of the World have been primarily recruited from the ranks of those who were initiates on the moon chain, the cycle of evolution preceding ours, or who have come in on certain streams of solar energy, astrologically determined, from other planetary schemes. Yet those who have triumphed in our own humanity are rapidly increasing in number, and hold all the minor offices beneath the central esoteric group of 6, who, with the Lord of the World, form the heart of hierarchical effort. The immediate effect, the result of their advent, millennia of years ago, was stupendous, and its effects are still being felt. Those effects might be enumerated as follows. The planetary logos on his own plane was enabled to take a more direct method in producing the results he desired for working out his plan. As is well known, the planetary scheme, with its dense globe and inner subtler globes, is to the planetary logos what the physical body and its subtler bodies are to man. Hence in illustration it might be said that the coming into incarnation of Sanat Kumara was analogous to the firm grip of self-conscious control that the ego of a human being takes upon his vehicles when the necessary stage in evolution has been achieved. It has been said that in the head of every man are 7 centers of force, which are linked to the other centers in the body, and through which the force of the ego is spread and circulated, thus working out the plan. Sanat Kumara, with the 6 other Kumaras, holds a similar position. These central 7 are as the 7 head centers to the body corporate. They are the directing agents and the transmitters of the energy, force, purpose, and will of the planetary logos on his own plane. This planetary head center works directly through the heart and throat centers, and thereby controls all the remaining. This is by way of illustration, and an attempt to show the relation of the hierarchy to its planetary source, and also the close analogy between the method of functioning of a planetary logos and of man, the microcosm. The third kingdom of nature, the animal kingdom, had reached a relatively high state in evolution, and animal man was in possession of the earth. He was a being with a powerful physical body, a coordinated astral body, or body of sensation and feeling, and a rudimentary germ of mind which might some day form a nucleus of a mental body. Left to himself for long eons, animal man would have eventually progressed out of the animal kingdom into the human, and would have become a self-conscious, functioning, rational entity. But how slow the process would have been may be evidenced by the study of the Bushmen of South Africa, the Vedas of Ceylon, and the hairy Inus. The decision of the planetary logos to take a physical vehicle produced an extraordinary stimulation in the evolutionary process, and by his incarnation, and the methods of force distribution he employed, he brought about in a brief cycle of time what would otherwise have been inconceivably slow. The germ of mind in animal man was stimulated. The fourfold lower man, A, the physical body in its dual capacity, etheric and dense. B, vitality, life force, or prana. C, the astral or emotional body. D, the incipient germ of mind, was coordinated and stimulated, and became a fit receptacle for the coming in of the self-conscious entities, those spiritual triads, the reflection of spiritual will, intuition, or wisdom, and higher mind, who had for long ages been waiting for just such a fitting. The fourth, or human kingdom, came thus into being, and the self-conscious, or rational unit, man, began his career. Another result of the advent of the hierarchy was a similar, though less recognized development in all the kingdoms of nature. In the mineral kingdom, for instance, certain of the minerals or elements received an added stimulation, and became radioactive, and a mysterious chemical change took place in the vegetable kingdom. This facilitated the bridging process between the vegetable and animal kingdom, just as the radioactivity of minerals is the method of bridging the gulf between the mineral and vegetable kingdoms. In due course of time, scientists will recognize that every kingdom in nature is linked and entered when the units of that kingdom become radioactive. But it is not necessary for us to digress along these lines. A hint suffices for those who have eyes to see, and the intuition to comprehend the meaning conveyed by terms which are handicapped by having a purely material connotation. In Lemurian days, after the great descent of the spiritual existences to the earth, the work they planned to do was systematized. Offices were apportioned, and the processes of evolution in all the departments of nature were brought under the conscious wise guidance of this initial brotherhood. This hierarchy of brothers of light still exists, and the work goes steadily on. They are all in physical existence, either in dense physical bodies, such as many of the masters employ, or in etheric bodies, such as the more exalted helpers and the Lord of the world occupy. It is of value for men to remember that they are in physical existence, and to bear in mind that they exist upon this planet with us, controlling its destinies, guiding its affairs, and leading all its evolutions onto an ultimate perfection. The central home of this hierarchy is at Shambhala, a center in the Gobi Desert, called in the ancient books the White Island. It exists in etheric matter, and when the race of men on earth have developed etheric vision, its location will be recognized, and its reality admitted. The development of this vision is rapidly coming to pass, as may be seen from the newspapers and the current literature of the day, but the location of Shambhala will be one of the latest etheric sacred spots to be revealed as it exists in the matter of the second ether. Several of the masters in physical bodies dwell in the Himalaya mountains, in a secluded spot called Shagatsa, far from the ways of men, but the greater number are scattered all over the world, dwelling in different places in the various nations, unrecognized and unknown, yet forming each in his own place a focal point for the energy of the Lord of the world, and proving to his environment a distributor of the love and wisdom of the deity, the opening of the door of initiation. It is not possible to touch upon the history of the hierarchy during the long ages of its work, beyond mentioning certain outstanding events of the past, and pointing out certain eventualities. For ages after its immediate founding, the work was slow and discouraging. Thousands of years came and went, and races of men appeared and disappeared from the earth before it was possible to delegate even the work done by initiates of the first degree for the evolving sons of men. But in the middle of the fourth root race, the Atlantean, an event occurred which necessitated a change, or innovation in the hierarchical method. Certain of its members were called away to higher work elsewhere in the solar system, and this brought in, through necessity, a number of highly evolved units of the human family. In order to enable others to take their place, the lesser members of the hierarchy were all moved up a step, leaving vacancies among the minor posts. Therefore 3 things were decided upon in the council chamber of the Lord of the world. 1. To close the door through which animal men passed into the human kingdom, permitting for a time no more monads on the higher plane to appropriate bodies. This restricted the number of the 4th, or human kingdom, to its then limitation. 2. To open another door, and permit members of the human family, who were willing to undergo the necessary discipline, and to make the required stupendous effort, to enter the 5th or spiritual kingdom. In this way the ranks of the hierarchy could be filled by the members of Earth's humanity who qualified. This door is called the portal of initiation, and still remains open upon the same terms as laid down by the Lord of the world in Atlantean days. These terms will be stated in the last chapter of this book. The door between the human and animal kingdoms will again be opened during the next great cycle, or round as it is called in some books. But as this is several million years away from us at this time, we are not concerned with it. 3. It was also decided to make the line of demarcation between the 2 forces of matter and spirit clearly defined. The inherent duality of all manifestation was emphasized, with the aim in view of teaching men how to liberate themselves from the limitations of the 4th, or human kingdom, and thus pass on into the 5th, or spiritual. The problem of good or evil, light or darkness, right or wrong, was enunciated solely for the benefit of humanity, and to enable men to cast off the fetters which imprison spirit, and thus achieve spiritual freedom. This problem exists not in the kingdoms below man, nor for those who transcend the human. Man has to learn through experience and pain the fact of the duality of all existence. Having thus learnt, he chooses that which concerns the fully conscious spirit aspect of divinity, and learns to center himself in that aspect. Having thus achieved liberation, he finds indeed that all is one, that spirit and matter are a unity, naught existing save that which is to be found within the consciousness of the planetary logos, and, in wider circles, within the consciousness of the solar logos. The hierarchy thus took advantage of the discriminative faculty of mind, which is the distinctive quality of humanity, to enable him, through the balancing of the pairs of opposites, to reach his goal, and to find his way back to the source from whence he came. This decision led to that great struggle which distinguished the Atlantean civilization, and which culminated in the destruction called the Flood, referred to in all the scriptures of the world. The forces of light, and the forces of darkness, were arrayed against each other, and this for the helping of humanity. The struggle still persists, and the World War through which we have just passed was a recrudescence of it. On every side in that World War 2 groups were to be found, those who fought for an ideal as they saw it, for the highest that they knew, and those who fought for material and selfish advantage. In the struggle of these influential idealists or materialists, many were swept in who fought blindly and ignorantly, being thus overwhelmed with racial karma and disaster. These 3 decisions of the hierarchy are having, and will have a profound effect upon humanity, but the result desired is being achieved, and a rapid hastening of the evolutionary process, and a profoundly important effect upon the mind aspect in man, can already be seen. It might here be well to point out that, working as members of that hierarchy are a great number of beings called angels by the Christian, and devas by the Oriental. Many of them have passed through the human stage long ages ago, and work now in the ranks of the great evolution parallel to the human, and which is called the Deva evolution. This evolution comprises, among other factors, the builders of the objective planet and the forces which produce, through those builders, every form familiar and unfamiliar. The devas who cooperate with the hierarchical effort concern themselves, therefore, with the form aspect, whilst the other members of the hierarchy are occupied with the development of consciousness within the form. Chapter 5. The three departments of the hierarchy. We have already dealt with the subject of the founding of the hierarchy upon earth, and we saw how it came to be, touching likewise upon certain crises which have occurred, and which still affect events in the present time. In dealing with the work and aims of the personnel of the hierarchy, it will not be possible to state what those aims have been, nor to consider in detail who the active personalities have been during the past millennia of years since the hierarchy came into existence. Many great beings from planetary and solar sources, and once or twice from cosmic sources, have at times lent their aid, and dwelt briefly upon our planet. By the energy which flowed through them, and by their profound wisdom and experience, they stimulated Earth's evolutions and brought the purposes of the planetary logos so much the nearer to completion. Then they passed on, and their places were taken by those among the members of the hierarchy who were willing to undergo specific training and expansion of consciousness. In turn, these adepts and masters had their places filled by initiates, and thus constantly has there been opportunity for disciples and highly evolved men and women to pass into the ranks of the hierarchy, and thus constantly has there been a circulation of new life and blood, and the coming in of those who belong to a particular period or age. Some of the great names during the later periods are known to history, such as Sri Shankaracharya, Vyasa, Muhammad, Jesus of Nazareth, and Krishna, down to those lesser initiates, Paul of Tarsus, Luther, and certain of the outstanding lights in European history. Always have these men and women been agents for the carrying out of race purpose, for the bringing about of group conditions, and for the furthering of the evolution of humanity. Sometimes they have appeared as beneficent forces, bringing peace and contentment with them. More often have they come as agents of destruction, breaking up the old forms of religion and of government in order that the life within the rapidly crystallizing form might be set free and build for itself a newer and a better vehicle. Much that is stated here is already well known, and has already been given out in the different occult books. Yet in the wise and careful enunciation of collected facts, and their correlation with that which may be new to some students, comes an eventual synthetic grasp of the great plan, and a wise uniform realization as to the work of that great group of liberated souls who, in utter self-abnegation, stand silently behind the world panorama. Through the power of their will, the strength of their meditations, the wisdom of their plans, and the scientific knowledge of energy which is theirs, they direct those force currents, and control those form-building agencies which produce all that is seen and unseen, movable and immovable in the sphere of creation within the three worlds. This, coupled to their vast experience, is what fits them to be the agents for the distribution of the energy of the planetary logos, as has already been stated, at the head of affairs, controlling each unit and directing all evolution, stands the King, the Lord of the world, Sanat Kunyara, the youth of endless summers, and the fountainhead of the will, showing forth as love, of the planetary logos. Cooperating with him as his advisors are three personalities called the Pratyeka Buddhas, or the Buddhas of activity. These four are the embodiment of active, intelligent, loving will. They are the full flowering of the intelligence, having achieved in an earlier solar system that which man is now striving to perfect. In earlier cycles in this system they began to demonstrate intelligent love, and from the standpoint of the average human being they are perfect love and perfect intelligence, though from the standpoint of that existence who embraces even our planetary scheme in his body of manifestation, that love aspect is as yet but in process of developing, and the will is only embryonic. Another solar system will see the will aspect come to fruition, as love will mature in this, standing around the Lord of the world, but withdrawn and esoteric, are three more Kamaras, who make the seven of planetary manifestation. Their work is to us necessarily obscure. The three exoteric Buddhas, or Kamaras, are the sum total of activity or planetary energy, and the three esoteric Kamaras embody types of energy, which as yet are not in full demonstration upon our planet. Each of these 6 Kamaras is a reflection of, and the distributing agent for, the energy and force of one of the 6 other planetary logoi, the remaining 6 spirits before the throne. Sanat Kumara alone, in this scheme, is self-sustaining and self-sufficient, being the physical incarnation of one of the planetary logoi, which one it is not permissible to state, as this fact is one of the secrets of initiation. Through each of them passes the life force of one of the 6 rays, and in considering them one might sum up their work and position as follows. 1. They each embody one of the 6 types of energy, with the Lord of the world as the synthesizer, and the embodier of the perfect 7th type, our planetary type. 2. They are each distinguished by one of the 6 colors, with the Lord of the world showing forth the full planetary color, these 6 being subsidiary. 3. Their work is therefore concerned, not only with force distribution, but with the passing into our scheme from other planetary schemes, of egos seeking Earth experience. 4. Each of them is in direct communication with one or another of the sacred planets. 5. According to astrological conditions, and according to the turning of the planetary wheel of life, so one or another of these Kamaras will be active. The 3 Buddhas of activity change from time to time, and become in turn exoteric or esoteric as the case may be. Only the king persists steadily and watchfully in active physical incarnation. Besides these main presiding personalities in the council chamber at Shambhala, there is a group of 4 beings who are the representatives upon the planet of the 4 Maharajas, or the 4 lords of karma in the solar system, of Io are specifically concerned with the evolution at the present time of the human kingdom. These 4 are connected with, -1. The distribution of karma, or human destiny, as it affects individuals, and through the individuals, the groups. 2. The care and tabulation of the Akashic records. They are concerned with the halls of records, or with the keeping of the book, as it is called in the Christian Bible. They are known in the Christian world as the recording angels. 3. The participation in solar councils. They alone have the right during the world's cycle to pass beyond the periphery of the planetary scheme, and participate in the councils of the solar logos. Thus they are literally planetary mediators, representing our planetary logos, and all that concerns him in the greater scheme of which he is but a part. Cooperating with these karmic lords are the large groups of initiates and devas who occupy themselves with the right adjustment of a. World karma, b. Acial karma, c. National karma, d. Group karma, e. Individual karma, and who are responsible to the planetary logos for the correct manipulation of those forces and building agencies, which bring in the right egos on the different rays at the correct times and seasons. With all these groups we have little concern, for they are contacted only by initiates of the 3rd initiation, and by those of even more exalted rank. The remaining personnel of the hierarchy is divided into 3 main and 4 subsidiary groups, each of these groups, as will be seen by reference to the appended chart, being presided over by one of those whom we call the 3 great lords, the work of the Manu. The Manu presides over Group 1. He is called Vaivasvata Manu, and is the Manu of the 5th root race. He is the ideal man or thinker, and sets the type for our Aryan race, having presided over its destinies since its inception nearly 100,000 years ago. Other Manus have come and gone, and his place will be, in the relatively near future, taken by someone else. He will then pass on to other work of a more exalted kind. The Manu, or the prototype of the fourth root race, works in close cooperation with him, and has his center of influence in China. He is the second Manu that the fourth root race has had, having taken the place of the earlier Manu at the time of the final stages of Atlantean destruction. He has remained to foster the development of the race type, and to bring about its final disappearance. The periods of office of all the Manus overlap, but there remains no representative of the third root race upon the globe at this time. Vivasvata Manu has his dwelling place in the Himalaya mountains, and has gathered around him at Shagatsa some of those immediately connected with Aryan affairs in India, Europe, and America, and those who will later be concerned with the coming sixth root race. The plans are prepared for ages ahead, centers of energy are formed thousands of years before they will be required, and in the wise foreknowledge of these divine men nothing is left to sudden eventuation, but all moves in ordered cycles and under rule and law, though within karmic limitations. The work of the Manu is largely concerned with government, with planetary politics, and with the founding, direction, and dissolution of racial types and forms. To him is committed the will and purpose of the planetary logos. He knows what is the immediate objective for this cycle of evolution over which he has to preside, and his work concerns itself with making that will an accomplished fact. He works in closer cooperation with the building devas than does his brother, the Christ, for to him is given the work of setting the race type, of segregating the groups out of which races will develop, of manipulating the forces which move the earth's crust, of raising and lowering continents, of directing the minds of statesmen everywhere so that racial government will proceed as desired, and conditions be brought about which will produce those needed for the fostering of any particular type. Such a work can now be seen demonstrating in North America and Australia. The energy which flows through him emanates from the head center of the planetary logos, passing to him through the brain of Sanat Kumara, who focalizes all the planetary energy within himself. He works by the means of a dynamic meditation, conducted within the head center, and produces his results through his perfect realization of that which has to be accomplished, through a power to visualize that which must be done to bring about accomplishment, and through a capacity to transmit creative and destructive energy to those who are his assistants. And all this is brought about through the power of the enunciated sound, the work of the world teacher, the Christ. Group 2 has the world teacher for its presiding head. He is that great being whom the Christian calls the Christ. He is known also in the Orient as the Bodhisattva, and as the Lord Maitreya, and is the one looked for by the devout Mohammedan, under the name of the Imam Mahdi. He it is who has presided over the destinies of life since about 600 BC, and he it is who has come out among men before, and who is again looked for. He is the great Lord of love and of compassion, just as his predecessor, the Buddha, was the Lord of wisdom. Through him flows the energy of the second aspect, reaching him direct from the heart center of the planetary logos via the heart of Sanat Kumara. He works by means of a meditation centered within the heart. He is the world teacher, the master of the masters, and the instructor of the angels, and to him is committed the guidance of the spiritual destinies of men, and the development of the realization within each human being that he is a child of God, and a son of the Most High. Just as the Manu is occupied with the providing of the type and forms through which consciousness can evolve and gather experience, thus making existence, in its deepest sense, possible, so the world teacher directs that indwelling consciousness in its life or spirit aspect, seeking to energize it within the form so that, in due course of time, that form can be discarded, and the liberated spirit return whence it came. Ever since he left the earth, as related with approximate accuracy in the Bible story, though with much error in detail, has he stayed with the sons of men. Never has he really gone, but only in appearance, and in a physical body he can be found by those who know the way, dwelling in the Himalayas, and working in close cooperation with his two great brothers, the Manu and the Mahakohan. Daily he pours out his blessing on the world, and daily he stands under the great pine in his garden at the sunset hour with hands uplifted in blessing over all those who truly and earnestly seek to aspire. To him all seekers are known, and, though they may remain unaware of him, the light which he pours forth stimulates their desire, fosters the spark of struggling life, and spurs on the aspirant until the momentous day dawns when they stand face to face with the one who, by being lifted up, occultly understood, is drawing all men unto himself as the initiator of the sacred mysteries, the work of the Lord of Civilization, the Mahachohan. Group 3 has as its head the Mahachohan. His rule over the group persists for a longer period than that of his two brothers, and he may hold office for the term of several root races. He is the sum total of the intelligence aspect. The present Mahachohan is not the original one who held the office at the founding of the hierarchy in Lemurian days. It was then held by one of the Kumaras, or Lords of the Flame, who came into incarnation with Sanat Kumara, but he took hold of his position during the second sub-race of the Atlantean root race. He had achieved adeptship on the moon chain, and it was through his instrumentality that a large number of the present more advanced human beings came into incarnation in the middle of the Atlantean root race. Karmic affiliation with him was one of the predisposing causes, thus making this eventuality possible. His work concerns itself with the fostering and strengthening of that relation between spirit and matter, life and form, the self and the not-self, which results in what we call civilization. He manipulates the forces of nature, and is largely the emanating source of electrical energy as we know it. Being the reflection of the third, or creative aspect, energy from the planetary logos flows to him from the throat center, and he it is who in many ways makes the work of his brothers possible. Their plans and desires are submitted to him, and through him pass the instructions to a large number of the Deva agents. Thus you have will, love, and intelligence represented in these three great lords. You have the self, the not-self, and the relation between synthesized in the unity of manifestation. You have racial government, religion and civilization forming a coherent whole, and you have physical manifestation, the love or desire aspect, and the mind of the planetary logos working out into objectivity. The closest cooperation and unity exists between these three personalities, and every move and plan and event exists in their united foreknowledge. They are in daily touch with the Lord of the world at Shambhala, and the entire guidance of affairs rests in their hands, and in those of the Manu of the fourth root race. The world teacher holds office in connection with both the fourth and fifth root races. Each of these departmental heads directs a number of subsidiary offices, and the department of the Mahachohan is divided into 5 divisions, so as to take in the 4 lesser aspects of hierarchical rule. Under the Manu work the regents of the different world divisions, such as, for instance, the Master Jupiter, the oldest of the masters now working in physical bodies for humanity, who is the regent for India, and the Master Rakatsi, who is the regent for Europe and America. It must be remembered here that though the Master R, for instance, belongs to the 7th ray, and thus comes under the department of energy of the Mahachohan, yet in hierarchical work he may and does hold office temporarily, under the Manu. These regents hold in their hands the reins of government for continents and nations, thus guiding, even if unknown, their destinies. They impress and inspire statesmen and rulers, they pour forth mental energy on governing groups, thus bringing about the desired results wherever cooperation and receptive intuition can be found amongst the thinkers. The world teacher presides over the destiny of the great religions through the medium of a group of masters and initiates, who direct the activities of these different schools of thought. In illustration, the Master Jesus, the inspirer and director of the Christian churches everywhere, though an adept on the 6th ray under the department of the Mahachohan, works at present under the Christ for the welfare of Christianity. Other masters hold similar posts in relation to the great Oriental faiths, and the various Occidental schools of thought. In the department of the Mahachohan a large number of masters, in 5-fold division, work in connection with the Deva evolution, and with the intelligence aspect in man. Their divisions follow those of the four minor rays of attribute: -1. The ray of harmony or beauty. 2. The ray of concrete science or knowledge. 3. The ray of devotion or abstract idealism. 4. The ray of ceremonial law or magic, just as the three departmental heads represent the three major rays of 1. Will or power. 2. Love or wisdom. 3. Active intelligence or adaptability. The four rays or attributes of mind, with the third ray of intelligence, as synthesized by the Mahakoan, make up the sum total of the fifth principle of mind or monas. Chapter 6. The Lodge of Masters. Their divisions, we have considered somewhat the highest offices in the ranks of the hierarchy of our planet. Now we will deal with what we might call the two divisions into which the remaining members are divided. They form literally two lodges within the greater body. A. The lodge, comprised of initiates above the fifth initiation, and a group of devas or angels. B. The Bind Lodge, comprised of all initiates of the third, fourth, and fifth initiations. Below these come a large group of initiates of the first and second initiations, and then the disciples of every grade. The disciples are considered as affiliated with the lodge, but not as literally members of it. Finally come those who are on probation, and who hope through strenuous effort to achieve affiliation. From another point of view, we can consider the lodge members as existing in 7 groups, each group representing one type of the sevenfold planetary energy emanating from the planetary logos. The triple division has first been given. As ever in evolution, you have the major 3, manifesting through the 3 departments, and then the 7, these 7 showing again as a triple differentiation, and a septenary. Students must bear in mind all that is herein imparted concerns the work of the hierarchy in connection with the fourth or human kingdom, and refers especially to those masters who work in connection with humanity. Were the Deva evolution being dealt with, the entire tabulation and division would have to differ from this. Again, there are certain aspects of hierarchical work affecting, for instance, the animal kingdom. This work calls into activity beings and workers and adepts totally distinct from the servers of the fourth, or human, kingdom. Therefore, students should carefully remember that all these details are relative, and that the work and personnel of the hierarchy are infinitely greater and more important than may appear upon a superficial reading of these pages. Certainly, we are dealing with what might be considered its primary work, for in the service of the human kingdom we are concerned with the manifestation of the 3 aspects of divinity, but the other departments are interdependent and the work progresses as a synthetic whole. The workers, or adepts, concerned with the evolution of the human family, comprise 63, if the 3 great lords are counted in, making the 9 times 7 necessary for the work. Of these 49 work exoterically, if it might be so expressed, and 14 esoterically, being more concerned with the subjective manifestation. Not many of their names are known to the public, nor would it be wise in many cases to reveal who they are, where they dwell, and what is their particular sphere of activity. A very small minority, through group karma, and a willingness thus to sacrifice themselves, have come before the public eye during the past 100 years, and therefore concerning these, certain information may be given out. Quite a number of people in the world today are aware of their existence independently of any particular school of thought, and the realization that those whom they thus know personally are workers in a great and unified scheme of endeavor may encourage these real knowers to testify to their knowledge, and thus establish past all controversy the reality of their work. Certain schools of occultism and a theosophical endeavor have claimed to be the sole repository of their teaching, and the sole outlet for their efforts, thereby limiting that which they do, and formulating premises which time and circumstance will fail to substantiate. They work most assuredly through such groups of thinkers, and throw much of their force into the work of such organizations, yet, nevertheless, they have their disciples and their followers everywhere, and work through many bodies and many aspects of teaching. Throughout the world, Disciples of these masters have come into incarnation at this time with the sole intent of participating in the activities and occupations and truth dissemination of the various churches, sciences, and philosophies, and thus producing within the organization itself an expansion, a widening, and a disintegration where necessary, which might otherwise be impossible. It might be wise for occult students everywhere to recognize these facts, and to cultivate the ability to recognize the hierarchical vibration, as it demonstrates through the medium of disciples in the most unlikely places and groups. One point should here be stated in connection with the work of the masters through their disciples, and it is this:
all the various schools of thought which are fostered by the energy of the lodge are, in every case, founded by a disciple, or several disciples, and upon these disciples, and not upon the master, lies responsibility for results and the consequent karma. The method of procedure is somewhat as follows: the master reveals to a disciple the objective in view for an immediate little cycle, and suggests to him that such and such a development would be desirable. It is the work of the disciple to ascertain the best method for bringing about the desired results, and to formulate the plans whereby a certain percentage of success will be possible. Then he launches his scheme, founds his society or organization, and disseminates the necessary teaching. Upon him rests the responsibility for choosing the right co-workers, for handing on the work to those best fitted, and for clothing the teaching in a presentable garb. All that the master does is to look on with interest and sympathy at the endeavor, as long as it holds its initial high ideal and proceeds with pure altruism upon its way. The master is not to blame should the disciple show lack of discrimination in the choice of co-workers, or evidence an inability to represent the truth. If he does well, and the work proceeds as desired, the master will continue to pour his blessing upon the attempt. If he fails, or his successors turn from the original impulse, thus disseminating error of any kind, in his love and in his sympathy the master will withdraw that blessing, withhold his energy, and thus cease from stimulating that which had better die. Forms may come and go, and the interest of the master and his blessing pour through this or that channel. The work may proceed through one medium or another, but always the life force persists, shattering the form where it is inadequate, or utilizing it when it suffices for the immediate need.
Certain masters and their work, under the first great group of which the Manu is the head, can be found two masters, the Master Jupiter, and the Master Moya. Both of them have taken more than the fifth initiation, and the Master Jupiter, who is also the regent of India, is looked up to by all the Lodge of Masters as the oldest among them. He dwells in the Nilgiri hills in southern India, and is not one of the masters who usually takes pupils, for he numbers amongst his disciples initiates of high degree, and quite a number of masters. In his hands are the reins of government for India, including a large part of the northern frontier, and to him is committed the arduous task of eventually guiding India out of her present chaos and unrest, and of welding her diverse peoples into an ultimate synthesis. The Master Moya, who is one of the best known of the Eastern adepts, and who numbers amongst his pupils a large number of Europeans and Americans, is a Rajput prince, and for many decades held an authoritative position in Indian affairs. He works in close cooperation with the Manu, and will himself eventually hold office as the Manu of the sixth root race. He dwells, as does his brother, the Master K. H. at Shagatsa in the Himalayas, and is a well-known figure to the inhabitants of that faraway village. He is a man of tall and commanding presence, dark hair and beard and dark eyes, and might be considered stern were it not for the expression that lies in his eyes. He and his brother, the Master K. H., work almost as a unit, and have done so for many centuries and will, on into the future, for the Master K. H. is in line for the office of World Teacher when the present holder of that office vacates it for higher work, and the sixth root race comes into being. The houses in which they both dwell are close together, and much of their time is spent in the closest association. As the Master M. is upon the first ray, that of will or power, his work largely concerns itself with the carrying out of the plans of the present Manu. He acts as the inspirer of the statesmen of the world. He manipulates forces, through the Mahakoan, that will bring about the conditions desired for the furthering of racial evolution. On the physical plane, those great national executives, who have far vision and the international ideal, are influenced by him, and with him cooperate certain of the great devas of the mental plane, and 3 great groups of angels work with him on mental levels, in connection with the lesser devas who vitalize thought forms, and thus keep alive the thought forms of the guides of the race for the benefit of the whole of humanity. The Master M has a large body of pupils under his instruction, and works in connection with many organizations of an esoteric and occult kind, as well as through the politicians and statesmen of the world. The Master Kuthumi, who is also very well known in the Occident, and has many pupils everywhere, is of Kashmiri origin, though the family originally came from India. He is also an initiate of high degree, and is upon the 2nd, or the love-wisdom ray. He is a man of noble presence, and tall, though of rather slighter build than the Master M. He is of fair complexion, with golden brown hair and beard, and eyes of a wonderful deep blue, through which seem to pour the love and the wisdom of the ages. He has had a wide experience and education, having been originally educated at one of the British universities, and speaks English fluently. His reading is wide and extensive, and all the current books and literature in various languages find their way to his study in the Himalayas. He concerns himself largely with the vitalizing of certain of the great philosophies, and interests himself in a number of philanthropic agencies. To him is given the work very largely of stimulating the love manifestation which is latent in the hearts of all men, and of awakening in the consciousness of the race the perception of the great fundamental fact of brotherhood. At this particular time the Master M, the Master K, and the Master Jesus are interesting themselves closely with the work of unifying, as far as may be, Eastern and Western thought, so that the great religions of the East, with the later development of the Christian faith in all its many branches, may mutually benefit each other. Thus eventually it is hoped one great universal church may come into being. The Master Jesus, who is the focal point of the energy that flows through the various Christian churches, is at present living in a Syrian body, and dwells in a certain part of the Holy Land. He travels much and passes considerable time in various parts of Europe. He works specially with masses more than with individuals, though he has gathered around him quite a numerous body of pupils. He is upon the 6th ray of devotion, or abstract idealism, and his pupils are frequently distinguished by that fanaticism and devotion which manifested in earlier Christian times amongst the martyrs. He himself is rather a martial figure, a disciplinarian, and a man of iron rule and will. He is tall and spare with rather a long thin face, black hair, pale complexion and piercing blue eyes. His work at this time is exceedingly responsible, for to him is given the problem of steering the thought of the Occident out of its present state of unrest into the peaceful waters of certitude and knowledge, and of preparing the way in Europe and America for the eventual coming of the world teacher. He is well known in the Bible history, coming before us first as Joshua the son of Nun, appearing again in the time of Ezra as Jeshua, taking the 3rd initiation, as related in the book of Zechariah, as Joshua, and in the Gospel story he is known for 2 great sacrifices, that in which he handed over his body for the use of the Christ, and for the great renunciation which is the characteristic of the 4th initiation. As Apollonius of Tyana, he took the 5th initiation and became a master of the wisdom. From that time on he has stayed and worked with the Christian Church, fostering the germ of true spiritual life, which is to be found amongst members of all sects and divisions, and neutralizing as far as possible the mistakes and errors of the churchmen and the theologians. He is distinctively the great leader, the general, and the wise executive, and in church matters he cooperates closely with the Christ, thus saving him much and acting as his intermediary wherever possible. No one so wisely knows as he the problems of the West. No one is so closely in touch with the people who stand for all that is best in Christian teachings, and no one is so well aware of the need of the present moment. Certain great prelates of the Anglican and Catholic churches are wise agents of his. The Master Jewel Kul, or the Master DK as he is frequently called, is another adept on the 2nd ray of love wisdom. He is the latest of the adepts taking initiation, having taken the fifth initiation in 1875, and is therefore occupying the same body in which he took the initiation, most of the other masters having taken the fifth initiation whilst occupying earlier vehicles. His body is not a young one, and he is a Tibetan. He is very devoted to the master cage and occupies a little house not far distant from the larger one of the master, and from his willingness to serve and to do anything that has to be done, he has been called the messenger of the masters. He is profoundly learned, and knows more about the rays and planetary hierarchies of the solar system than anyone else in the ranks of the masters. He works with those who heal, and cooperates unknown and unseen with the seekers after truth in the world's great laboratories, with all who definitely aim at the healing and solacing of the world, and with the great philanthropic world movements such as the Red Cross. He occupies himself with various pupils of different masters who can profit by his instruction, and within the last 10 years has relieved both the Master M and the Master Cage of a good deal of their teaching work, taking over from them for certain stated times some of their pupils and disciples. He works largely, too, with certain groups of the devas of the ethers, who are the healing devas, and who thus collaborate with him in the work of healing some of the physical ills of humanity. He it was who dictated a large part of that momentous book The Secret Doctrine, and who showed to H.P. Blavatsky many of the pictures, and gave her much of the data that is to be found in that book. The master who concerns himself especially with the future development of racial affairs in Europe, and with the mental outgrowth in America and Australia, is the Master Rakotsi. He is a Hungarian, and has a home in the Carpathian Mountains, and was at one time a well-known figure at the Hungarian court. Reference to him can be found in old historical books, and he was particularly before the public eye when he was the Comte de Saint-Germain, and earlier still when he was both Roger Bacon and later, Francis Bacon. It is interesting to note that as the Master takes hold, on the inner planes, of affairs in Europe, his name as Francis Bacon is coming before the public eye in the Bacon-Shakespearean controversy. He is rather a small, spare man, with pointed black beard, and smooth black hair, and does not take as many pupils as the masters previously mentioned take. He is at present handling the majority of the third-ray pupils in the Occident in conjunction with the Master Hilarion. The Master R is upon the seventh ray, that of ceremonial magic or order, and he works largely through esoteric ritual and ceremonial, being vitally interested in the effects, hitherto unrecognized, of the ceremonial of the Freemasons, of the various fraternities, and of the churches everywhere. He is called in the lodge, usually, the Count, and in America and Europe acts practically as the general manager for the carrying out of the plans of the Executive Council of the Lodge. Certain of the masters form around the three great lords an inner group, and meet in council with great frequency. On the fifth ray of concrete knowledge or science, we find the Master Hilarion, who, in an earlier incarnation was Paul of Tarsus. He is occupying a Cretan body, but spends a large part of his time in Egypt. He it was who gave out to the world that occult treatise Light on the Path, and his work is particularly interesting to the general public at this crisis, for he works with those who are developing the intuition, and controls and transmutes the great movements that tend to strip the veil from the unseen. His is the energy which, through his disciples, is stimulating the psychical research groups everywhere, and he it was who initiated, through various pupils of his, the spiritualistic movement. He has under observation all those who are psychics of the higher order, and assists in developing their powers for the good of the group, and, in connection with certain of the devas of the astral plane, he works to open up to the seekers after truth, that subjective world which lies behind the grossly material. Little can be given out anent the two English masters. Neither of them takes pupils in the same sense that the Master Cage or the Master M take pupils. One of them, who resides in Great Britain, has in hand the definite guidance of the Anglo-Saxon race, and he works upon the plans for its future development and evolution. He is behind the labor movement throughout the world, transmuting and directing, and the present rising tide of democracy has his directing hand upon it. Out of the democratic unrest, out of the present turmoil and chaos, will arise the future world condition, which will have for its keynote cooperation and not competition, distribution, and not centralization. One other master may here be briefly mentioned, the master Serapis, frequently called the Egyptian. He is the master upon the fourth ray, and the great movements of the world, the evolution of music, and that of painting and drama, receive from him an energizing impulse. At present he is giving most of his time and attention to the work of the Deva, or angel evolution, until their agency helps to make possible the great revelation in the world of music and painting which lies immediately ahead. More about him cannot be given out, nor can his dwelling place be revealed. The Master P works under the Master R. In North America, he it is who has had much to do esoterically with the various mental sciences, such as Christian Science and New Thought, both of which are efforts put forth by the Lodge in an endeavor to teach men the reality of that which is not seen, and the power of the mind to create. This master occupies an Irish body, is on the fourth ray, and the place of his residence may not be revealed. Much of the work of the master Serapis was taken over by him, when he turned his attention to the Deva evolution, the present work. Certain facts concerning these masters, and their work in the present and in the future, may be in place here. First, the work of training their pupils and disciples to fit them to be of use in two great events. 1. The coming of the world teacher towards the middle or close of this present century, and the other, the training of them to be of use in the founding of the new sixth sub-race, and in the reconstruction of the present world conditions. This being the fifth sub-race of the fifth root race, the pressure of the work on the 5 rays of mind which are controlled by the Mahakoan is very great. The masters are carrying an over-heavy burden, and much of their work of teaching disciples has been delegated to initiates and advanced disciples, and certain of the masters on the first and second rays have temporarily taken over pupils in the Mahakoan's department. Secondly, to prepare the world on a large scale for the coming of the world teacher, and to take the necessary steps before they themselves come out among men, as many of them surely will towards the close of this century. A special group is forming amongst them now who are definitely preparing themselves for this work. The Master M, the Master Cage and the Master Jesus will be specially concerned with the movement towards the last quarter of this century. Other masters will participate also, but these 3 are the ones with whose names and offices people should familiarize themselves, wherever possible. 2 other masters, specially concerned with the 7th or ceremonial ray, whose particular work it is to supervise the development of certain activities within the next 15 years, work under the Master are very definitely may the assurance be given here, that prior to the coming of the Christ, adjustments will be made so that at the head of all great organizations will be found either a master, or an initiate who has taken the 3rd initiation. At the head of certain of the great occult groups, of the Freemasons of the world, and of the various great divisions of the Church, and resident in many of the great nations, will be found initiates or masters. This work of the masters is proceeding now, and all their efforts are being bent towards bringing it to a successful consummation. Everywhere they are gathering in those who in any way show a tendency to respond to high vibration, seeking to force their vibration and to fit them so that they may be of use at the time of the coming of the Christ. Great is the day of opportunity, for when that time comes, through the stupendous strength of the vibration then brought to bear upon the sons of men, it will be possible for those who now do the necessary work to take a great step forward, and to pass through the portal of initiation. Chapter 7. The Probationary Path. Preparation for Initiation. The probationary path precedes the path of initiation or holiness, and marks that period in the life of a man when he definitely sets himself on the side of the forces of evolution, and works at the building of his own character. He takes himself in hand, cultivates the qualities that are lacking in his disposition, and seeks with diligence to bring his personality under control. He is building the causal body with deliberate intent, filling any gaps that may exist, and seeking to make it a fit receptacle for the Christ principle. The analogy between the prenatal period in the history of the human being and that of the development of the indwelling spirit is curiously interesting. We might look at it in this way: 1. The moment of conception, corresponding to that of individualization. 2. 9 months gestation, corresponding to the wheel of life. 3. The first initiation, corresponding to the birth hour. The probationary path corresponds to the latter period of gestation, to the building in the heart of the babe in Christ. At the first initiation, this babe starts on the pilgrimage of the path. The first initiation stands simply for commencement. A certain structure of right living, thinking, and conduct has been built up. We call that form, character. It has now to be vivified and indwelt. Thackeray has well described this process of building, in the words so often quoted: sow a thought and reap an action, sow an action and reap a habit, sow a habit and reap character, sow character and reap destiny. The immortal destiny of each and all of us is to attain the consciousness of the higher self, and subsequently that of the divine spirit. When the form is ready, when Solomon's temple has been built in the quarry of the personal life, then the Christ life enters, and the glory of the Lord overshadows his temple. The form becomes vibrant. Therein lies the difference between theory and making that theory part of oneself. One can have a perfect image or picture, but it lacks life. The life can be modeled on the divine as far as may be. It may be an excellent copy but lacks the indwelling Christ principle. The germ has been there, but it has lain dormant. Now it is fostered and brought to the birth, and the first initiation is attained. Whilst the man is on the probationary path, he is taught principally to know himself, to ascertain his weaknesses and to correct them. He is taught to work as an invisible helper at first, and for several lives is generally kept at this kind of work. Later, as he makes progress, he may be moved to more selected work. He is taught the rudiments of the divine wisdom, and is entered into the final grades in the hall of learning. He is known to a master, and is in the care, for definite teaching, of one of the disciples of that master, or, if of rare promise, of an initiate. Classes are held by initiates of the first and second degrees, for accepted disciples and those on probation, between the hours of 10 and 5 every night in all parts of the world, so the continuity of the teaching is complete. They gather in the hall of learning, and the method is much the same as in big universities: classes at certain hours, experimental work, examinations, and a gradual moving up and onward as the tests are passed. A number of the egos on the probationary path are in the department that is analogous to the high school, others have matriculated and are in the university itself. Graduation results when initiation is taken and the initiate passes into the hall of wisdom. Advanced egos and the spiritually inclined, who are not yet on the probationary path, attend instructions from disciples, and on occasions large classes are conducted for their benefit by initiates. Their work is more rudimentary, though occult from a worldly standpoint, and they learn under supervision to be invisible helpers. The invisible helpers are usually recruited from amongst the advanced egos. The very advanced, and those on the probationary path, and nearing initiation, work more frequently in what might be termed departmental work, forming a group of assistants to the members of the hierarchy. Methods of teaching. 3 departments of instruction watch over 3 parts of man's development. First, instruction is given tending to the disciplining of the life, the growth of character, the development of the microcosm along cosmic lines. The man is taught the meaning of himself. He comes to know himself as a complex complete unit, a replica in miniature of the outer world. In learning the laws of his own being, comes comprehension of the self, and a realization of the basic laws of the system. Secondly, instruction is given as to the macrocosm, the amplification of his intellectual grip of the working of the cosmos. Information as to the kingdoms of nature, teaching as to the laws of those kingdoms, and instruction as to the working of those laws in all kingdoms, and on all planes is given him. He acquires a deep fund of general knowledge, and when he reaches his own periphery is met by those who lead him on to encyclopedic knowledge. When he has attained the goal, he may not know every single thing that there is to be known in all the three worlds, but the way to know, the sources of knowledge and the reservoirs of information are in his hand. A master can at any time find out anything on any possible subject without the slightest difficulty. Thirdly, instruction is given in what might be termed synthesis. This information is only possible as the intuitional vehicle coordinates. It is really the occult apprehension of the law of gravitation or attraction, the basic law of this, the second solar system, with all its corollaries. The disciple learns the meaning of occult cohesion, and of that internal unity which holds the system as a homogeneous unit. The major part of this instruction is usually given after the third initiation, but a beginning is made early in the training. Masters and disciples and advanced egos on the probationary path receive instruction at this particular time for two special purposes: a. to test out their fitness for special work lying in the future, the type of that work being known only to the guides of the race. They are tested for aptitude in community living with a view to drafting the suitable ones into the colony of the sixth sub-race. They are tested for various lines of work, many incomprehensible to us now, but which will become ordinary methods of development as time progresses. The masters also test for those in whom the intuition has reached a point of development that indicates a beginning of the coordination of the Buddhic vehicle, or, to be exact, has reached a point where molecules of the seventh subplane of the Buddhic plane can be discerned in the aura of the ego. When this is so, they can go ahead with confidence in the work of instruction, knowing that certain imparted facts will be understood. b. Instruction is being given at this time to a special group of people who have come into incarnation at this critical period of the world's history. They have come in, all at the same time, throughout the world, to do the work of linking up the two planes, the physical and astral, via the etheric. This sentence is for serious consideration, for it covers the work that a number of the newer generation have come to do. In this linking up of the two planes, people are required who are polarized in their mental bodies, or, if not polarized there, are nevertheless well rounded out and balanced, and can therefore work safely and with intelligence in this type of work. It necessitates primarily people in whose vehicles can be found a certain proportion of atomic subplane matter, so that direct communication can be effected between the higher and the lower via the atomic cross-section of the causal body. This is not easy to explain clearly, but a consideration of the diagram in A Study in Consciousness, by Mrs. Besant, page 27, may be helpful in explaining some matters that are apt to puzzle. We must recognize two things in pondering the subject of the masters and their disciples. First, that in the hierarchy nothing is lost through failure to recognize the law of economy. Every expenditure of force on the part of a master or teacher is subjected to wise foresight and discrimination. Just as we do not put university professors to teach the beginners, so the masters themselves work not individually with men until they have attained a certain stage of evolution, and are ready to profit by their instruction. Secondly, we must remember that each of us is recognized by the brilliance of his light. This is an occult fact. The finer the grade of matter built into our bodies, the more brilliantly will shine forth the indwelling light. Light is vibration, and through the measurement of vibration is fixed the grading of the scholars. Hence nothing can prevent a man's progress forward if he but attends to the purification of his vehicles. The light within will shine forth with ever greater clarity, as the refining process goes on, until, when atomic matter predominates, great will be the glory of that inner man. We are all graded, therefore, if it may be so expressed, according to the magnitude of the light, according to the rate of vibration, according to the purity of the tone and the clarity of the color. Who our teacher is depends therefore upon our grading. Similarity of vibration holds the secret. We are frequently told that when the demand is forceful enough, the teacher will appear. When we build in the right vibrations, and attune ourselves to the right key, nothing can prevent our finding the master. Groups of egos are formed: 1. According to their ray. 2. According to their sub-ray. 3. according to their rate of vibration. They are also grouped for purposes of classification. 1. As egos, according to the egoic ray. 2. As personalities, according to the sub-ray which is governing the personality. All are graded and charted. The masters have their halls of records, with a system of tabulation incomprehensible to us owing to its magnitude and its necessary intricacies, wherein these charts are kept. They are under the care of a Chohan of a ray, each ray having its own collection of charts. These charts, being in many sections, dealing with incarnate, discarnate, and perfected egos, are again all under the care of subordinate guardians. The Lapika lords, with their vast band of helpers, are the most frequent users of these charts. Many discarnate egos awaiting incarnation or having just left the earth, sacrifice their time in heaven to assist in this work. These halls of records are mostly on the lowest levels of the mental plane and the highest of the astral, as they can be there most fully utilized, and are most easily accessible. Initiates receive instruction directly from the masters or from some of the great devas or angels. These teachings are usually imparted at night in small classes, or individually, should the occasion warrant it, in the master's private study. The above applies to initiates in incarnation or on the inner planes. If on causal levels, they receive instruction at any time deemed advisable direct from the master to the ego on causal levels. Disciples are taught in groups in the master's ashram, or classroom, at night, if in incarnation. Apart from these regular gatherings, in order to receive direct teaching from the master, a disciple, for some specific reason, may be called to the master's study for a private interview. This occurs when a master wishes to see a disciple for commendation, warning, or to decide if initiation is desirable. The major part of a disciple's tuition is left in the hands of some initiate or more advanced disciple, who watches over his younger brother, and is responsible to the master for his progress, handing in regular reports. Karma is largely the arbiter of this relation. Just at present, owing to the great need in the world, a slightly different policy is being pursued. An intensified training is being given to some disciples by some masters, who have not hitherto taken pupils. The press of work on the masters who do take disciples being so great, they have delegated some of their most promising pupils to some other masters, drafting them into small groups for a brief period. The experiment is being tried of intensifying the teaching, and of subjecting disciples, not initiates, to the frequent strong vibration of a master. It involves risk, but, if the experiment proves successful, will tend to the greater assisting of the race. Chapter 8. Discipleship. A disciple described. A disciple is one who, above all else, is pledged to do three things: a. To serve humanity. b. To cooperate with the plan of the Great Ones as he sees it, and as best he may. c. To develop the powers of the ego, to expand his consciousness until he can function on the three planes in the three worlds, and in the causal body, and to follow the guidance of the higher self and not the dictates of his threefold lower manifestation. A disciple is one who is beginning to comprehend group work, and to change his center of activity from himself, as the pivot around which everything revolves, to the group center. A disciple is one who realizes simultaneously the relative insignificance of each unit of consciousness, and also its vast importance. His sense of proportion is adjusted, and he sees things as they are, he sees people as they are, he sees himself as he inherently is and seeks then to become that which he is. A disciple realizes the life or force side of nature, and to him the form makes no appeal. He works with force, and through force, he recognizes himself as a force center within a greater force center, and his is the responsibility of directing the energy which may pour through him into channels through which the group can be benefited. The disciple knows himself to be, to a greater or less degree, an outpost of the master's consciousness, viewing the master in a twofold sense: a. as his own egoic consciousness, b. as the center of his group, the force animating the units of the group, and binding them into a homogeneous whole. A disciple is one who is transferring his consciousness out of the personal into the impersonal, and during the transition stage much of difficulty and of suffering is necessarily endured. These difficulties arise from various causes: a. the disciple's lower self, which rebels at being transmuted;
b. a man's immediate group, friends, or family, who rebel at his growing impersonality.
They do not like to be acknowledged as one with him on the life side, and yet separate from him where desires and interests lie. Yet the law holds good, and only in the essential life of the soul can true unity be cognized. In the discovery as to what is form lies much of sorrow for the disciple, but the road leads to perfect union eventually. The disciple is one who realizes his responsibility to all units who come under his influence, a responsibility of cooperating with the plan of evolution as it exists for them, and thus to expand their consciousness and teach them the difference between the real and the unreal, between life and form. This he does most easily by a demonstration in his own life as to his goal, his object, and his centre of consciousness. The work to be done, the disciple, therefore, has several things at which to aim: a sensitive response to the Master's vibration, a practical purity of life, a purity not merely theoretical, a freedom from care. Here bear in mind that care is based on the personal, and is the result of lack of dispassion, and a too ready response to the vibrations of the lower worlds. Accomplishment of duty. This point involves the dispassionate discharge of all obligations and due attention to karmic debts. Special emphasis should be laid, for all disciples, on the value of dispassion. Lack of discrimination is not so often a hindrance to disciples these days, owing to the development of the mind, but lack of dispassion frequently is. This means the attainment of that state of consciousness where balance is seen, and neither pleasure nor pain dominates, for they are superseded by joy and bliss. We may well ponder on this, for much striving after dispassion is necessary. He has also to study the karma manasic body, desire mind body. This is a very real interest, for it is, in many ways, the most important body in the solar system, where the human being in the three worlds is concerned. In the next system, the mental vehicle of the self-conscious units will hold an analogous place, as the physical did in the previous solar system. He has also to work scientifically, if it may be so expressed, at the building of the physical body. He must so strive that he will produce in each incarnation a body which will serve better as a vehicle for force. Hence there is nothing impractical in giving information anent initiation, as some may think. There is no moment of the day that goal may not be visioned, and the work of preparation carried on. One of the greatest instruments for practical development lying in the hands of small and great is the instrument of speech. He who guards his words, and who only speaks with altruistic purpose, in order to carry the energy of love through the medium of the tongue, is one who is mastering rapidly the initial steps to be taken in preparation for initiation. Speech is the most occult manifestation in existence. It is the means of creation and the vehicle for force. In the reservation of words, esoterically understood, lies the conservation of force; in the utilization of words, justly chosen and spoken, lies the distribution of the love force of the solar system, that force which preserves, strengthens, and stimulates. Only he who knows somewhat of these two aspects of speech can be trusted to stand before the initiator, and to carry out from that presence certain sounds and secrets imparted to him under the pledge of silence. The disciple must learn to be silent in the face of that which is evil. He must learn to be silent before the sufferings of the world, wasting no time in idle plaints and sorrowful demonstration, but lifting up the burden of the world, working, and wasting no energy in talk. Yet withal he should speak where encouragement is needed, using the tongue for constructive ends, expressing the love force of the world as it may flow through him, where it will serve best to ease a load or lift a burden, remembering that as the race progresses, the love element between the sexes and its expression will be translated to a higher plane. Then, through the spoken word, and not through the physical plane expression as now, will come the realization of that true love which unites those who are one in service and in aspiration. Then love between the units of the human family will take the form of the utilization of speech for the purpose of creating on all planes, and the energy which now, in the majority, finds expression through the lower or generating centers will be translated to the throat center. This is as yet but a distant ideal, but even now some can vision that ideal, and seek, through united service, loving cooperation, and oneness in aspiration, thought, and endeavor, to give shape and form to it, even though inadequately, group relationships. The path of the disciple is a thorny one, briars beset his every step, and difficulties meet him at every turn. Yet in the treading of the path, in the overcoming of the difficulties, and in a single-hearted adherence to the good of the group, with a proportionate attention to the individuals and their evolutionary development, comes at length fruition, and the attainment of the goal. A server of the race stands forth. He is a server because he has no ends of his own to serve, and from his lower sheaths goes out no vibration which can beguile him from his chosen path. He serves, because he knows what is in man, and because for many lives he has worked with individuals and with groups, gradually expanding the range of his endeavor until he has gathered around him those units of consciousness whom he can energize and use, and through whom he can work out the plans of his superiors. Such is the goal, but the intermediate stages are fraught with difficulty for all who stand on the verge of self-discovery and of becoming the path itself. Some practical advice might be of value here. Study with care the first 3 books of the Bhagavad Gita. The problem of Arjuna is the problem of all disciples, and the solution is eternally the same. Stand ready and watch the heart. In the transferring of the fire from the solar plexus to the heart center comes much pain. It is not easy to love as do the great ones, with a pure love which requires nothing back, with an impersonal love that rejoices where there is response, but looks not for it, and loves steadily, quietly, and deeply through all apparent divergences, knowing that when each has found his own way home, he will find that home to be the place of at one meant. Be prepared for loneliness. It is the law. As a man dissociates himself from all that concerns his physical, astral and mental bodies, and centers himself in the ego, it produces a temporary separation. This must be endured and passed, leading to a closer link at a later period, with all associated with the disciple through the karma of past lives, through group work, and through the activity of the disciple, carried on almost unconsciously at first, in gathering together those through whom later he will work. Cultivate happiness, knowing that depression, an over-morbid investigation of motive, and undue sensitiveness to the criticism of others leads to a condition wherein a disciple is almost useless. Happiness is based on confidence in the God within, a just appreciation of time, and a forgetfulness of self. Take all the glad things which may come as trusts to be used to spread joy, and rebel not at happiness and pleasure in service, thinking it an indication that all is not well. Suffering comes as the lower self rebels. Control that lower self, eliminate desire, and all is joy. Have patience. Endurance is one of the characteristics of the ego. The ego persists, knowing itself immortal. The personality becomes discouraged, knowing that time is short. To the disciple naught occurs but what is in the plan, and where the motive and sole aspiration of the heart are towards the carrying out of the master's will and the serving of the race, that which eventuates has in it the seeds of the next enterprise, and embodies the environment of the next step forward. Herein lies much of clarification, and herein may be found that on which the disciple may rest when the vision is clouded, the vibration lower than perhaps it should be, and the judgment fogged by the miasmas arising from circumstances on the physical plane. With many, much arises in the astral body that is based on old vibration, and has no foundation in fact, and the battleground is so to control the astral situation that out of present anxieties and worries may grow confidence and peace, and out of violent action and interaction there may be elaborated tranquility. It is possible to reach a point where naught that occurs can ruffle the inner calm, where the peace that passeth understanding is known and experienced, because the consciousness is centered in the ego, who is peace itself, being the circle of the Buddhic life, where poise itself is known and felt, and equilibrium reigns because the center of the life is in the ego, who is, in essence, balance, where calm rules unruffled and unshaken, because the divine knower holds the reins of government, and permits no disturbance from the lower self, where bliss itself is reached that is based, not on circumstances in the three worlds, but on that inner realization of existence apart from the not-self, an existence that persists when time and space, and all that is contained therein, are not, that is known when all the illusions of the lower planes are experienced, passed through, transmuted and transcended, that endures when the little world of human endeavor has dissipated and gone, being seen as naught, and that is based on the knowledge that I am that. Such an attitude and experience is for all those who persist in their high endeavor, who count all things but naught if they may but achieve the goal, and who steer a steady course through circumstances, keeping the eyes fixed upon the vision ahead, the ears attentive to the voice of the God within, that sounds in the silence of the heart, the feet firmly placed on the path that leads to the portal of initiation, the hands held out in assistance to the world, and the whole life subordinated to the call of service. Then all that comes is for the best: sickness, opportunity, success, and disappointment, the jibes and machinations of enemies, the lack of comprehension on the part of those we love, all is but to be used, and all exists but to be transmuted. Continuity of vision, of aspiration, and of the inner touch, is seen to be of more importance than them all. That continuity is the thing to be aimed at, in spite of, and not because of circumstances. As the aspirant progresses, he not only balances the pairs of opposites, but is having the secret of his brother's heart revealed to him. He becomes an acknowledged force in the world, and is recognized as one who can be depended upon to serve. Men turn to him for assistance and help along his recognized line, and he begins to sound forth his notes so as to be heard in deva and human ranks. This he does, at this stage, through the pen in literature, through the spoken word in lecturing and teaching, through music, painting and art. He reaches the hearts of men in some way or another, and becomes a helper and server of his race. Two more characteristics of this stage might here be mentioned. The aspirant has an appreciation of the occult value of money and service. He seeks nothing for himself, save that which may equip him for the work to be done, and he looks upon money, and that which money can purchase, as something which is to be used for others, and as a means to bring about the fruition of the Master's plans as he senses those plans. The occult significance of money is little appreciated, yet one of the greatest tests, as to the position of a man upon the probationary path, is that which concerns his attitude to and his handling of that which all men seek in order to gratify desire. Only he who desires naught for himself can be a recipient of financial bounty, and a dispenser of the riches of the universe. In other cases where riches increase, they bring with them naught but sorrow and distress, discontent, and misuse. At this stage also the aspirant's life becomes an instrument of destruction in the occult sense of the term. Wherever he goes, the force which flows through him from the higher planes and his own inner God produces at times peculiar results upon his environment. It acts as a stimulator of both the good and the evil. The Luna Petris, or little lives which form the bodies of his brother, and his own body, are likewise stimulated, their activity is increased, and their power greatly aggravated. This fact is used by those who work on the inner side to bring about certain desired ends. This it is also which often causes the temporary downfall of advanced souls. They cannot stand the force pouring into them, or upon them, and through the temporary overstimulation of their centers and vehicles they go to pieces. This can be seen working out in groups as well as in individuals. But, inversely, if the lunar lords, or lives of the lower self, have been earlier subjugated and brought under control, then the effect of the force and energy contacted is to stimulate the response of the physical brain consciousness and the head centers to egoic contact. Then the otherwise destructive force becomes a factor for good and a helpful stimulation, and can be used by those who know how to lead men on to further illumination. All these steps have to work out on all the three lower planes, and in the three bodies, and this they do according to the particular ray and sub-ray. In this fashion is the work of the disciple carried forward, and his testing and training carried out. Thus is he brought, through right direction of energy and wise manipulation of force currents, to the portal of initiation, and he graduates from the hall of learning into the hall of wisdom, that hall wherein he gradually becomes aware of forces and powers latent in his own ego and egoic group, wherein the force of the egoic group is his for the using, for he can now be trusted to wield it only for the helping of humanity, and wherein, after the fourth initiation, he becomes a sharer in, and can be trusted with, some part of the energy of the planetary logos, and thus be enabled to carry forward the plans of that logos for evolution. It would be well to remember that disciples on the first ray understand discipleship largely in terms of energy, or force, or activity, whilst disciples on the second ray understand it more in terms of consciousness or initiation. Hence the divergence of expressions in ordinary use, and the lack of comprehension among thinkers. It might prove useful to express the idea of discipleship in terms of the different rays, meaning by this, discipleship as it manifests on the physical plane in service, first ray. Force, energy, action, the occultist. Second ray. Consciousness. Expansion, initiation, the true psychic. Third ray, adaptation, development, evolution, the magician. Fourth ray. Vibration, response, expression, the artist. Fifth ray, mentation, knowledge, science, the scientist. Sixth ray. Devotion, abstraction, idealism, the devotee. Seventh ray. Magic, incantation, ritual, the ritualist. Remember carefully that we are here dealing with disciples. Later on, as they progress, the various lines approximate and merge. All have been at one time magicians, for all have passed upon the third ray. The problem now is concerned with the mystic and the occultist, and their eventual synthesis. A careful study of the foregoing will lead to the realization that the difficulties between thinkers, and between disciples of all groups, consist in their identifying themselves with some form, and in their inability to understand the different points of view of others. As time elapses, and they are brought into closer relationship with the two masters with whom they are concerned, their own inner God, and their personal master, the inability to cooperate, and to merge their interests in the good of the group will pass away, and community of endeavor, similarity of object, and mutual cooperation will take the place of what is now so much seen, divergence. We might well ponder on this, for it holds the key to much that is puzzling and, to many, distressing. End of Part 1. Initiation Human and Solar by Alice Bailey. Part 2 of this audiobook is available at the Sophia Speaks audio library, along with other rare books and papers on subjects like consciousness, theosophy, and so much more. Thank you so much for listening to the end. If you'd like to support the growth of this channel, please like this video, and engage in discussion in the comments. This channel is here to connect people with big ideas and different perspectives, so if that's something you'd like to be part of, please subscribe to stay connected, and head to Part 2, starting at Chapter 9, The Path of Initiation.